Katie, I'm going.
We just
Let's
went
go.
live. I've lost you, Patrick.
I'm back. I'm back.
Yeah,
I had to go tell the
you did.
family to keep it down, very quiet. Daddy's on a call.
Okay, fine. Welcome everybody for, I think this might be my first live stream for quite some time. I know it's my first for quite some time. I've taken some time off and we're back with a vengeance. We have Life in China with Patrick, and Patrick is joining me from Chongqing. And welcome, Patrick, to Jerry's Take on China. We have Life in China with Patrick and Jerry's Take on China. So we should get some interesting discussions and debates about what's happening here in China. So let's first of all start with an introduction from you about you. Who are you? Why are you in China? What do you do here? And why do you do it in China?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I follow your channel and watch most of your videos that you put up. So I appreciate your work, and I like your condensed version as opposed to having 30 and 40-minute conversations. You do it in 10, 12 minutes, and it's nice and clear and gets to the point. So I appreciate that.
Well, I'm hoping this one will be longer than a 10 or 12 minute.
Well,
give me that.
It'd probably be a little bit longer than 10 or 12 minutes. But so my name is Patrick. I was born in San Antonio, raised in Amarillo, Texas, went to Texas Tech University, majored in communications with a minor in Russian language. Kind of funny story behind that. I was that close to taking Chinese in college. And now I wish I would have really taken it, because it would have helped me quite a bit. So, and then there's a reason too why I'm kind of sharing my kind of going back real far in my life, because it'll explain why I do some of the things that I do nowadays here in China. So I went to Texas Tech University. When I was at Tech, I actually did stand-up comedy. I was up at the comedy club probably 2 or 3 days a week religiously.
Right.
I was actually had considered going on the road. I did go on the road during the summer, but during the fall and spring, I'd just kind of do one little weekend gigs here and there. And Texas Tech had a competition. It was called the Funniest Collegiate Comic at Tech. And I ended up winning there and made it past the regionals. And I went to nationals, and I got a chance to work with Jerry Seinfeld. So Jerry Seinfeld,
wow.
actually, he hosted the show. It was hosted by Certs, or sponsored by Certs. And we were in Fort Lauderdale, and I was on MTV, and that just really, inspired me to go out on the road, which I actually never did because I just didn't want to live that life. But I've always had this passion for the arts and theater and acting and that kind of thing. And I've also had a passion for China, for Japan. I don't know if you remember the show Shogun. Do you remember It was back in the 70s.
James Clavell's book.
Mm-hmm.
The James Clavell book.
I never read the book, but I just really fell in love with the show. I love the costumes, the weapons they had, and just the storyline. And it was kind of from that point that I was like, I really want to go to some place like Japan or Okinawa or China. And that was kind of put on the sideline after I graduated from Tech. And so I spent about 20 plus years in the capital markets. I was an institutional wholesaler. So I would go into banks and brokerage firms and sell them products. Like I worked for John Hancock. We had mutual funds, variable annuities, fixed annuities, life insurance that we would get our clients to sell to their customer, kind of like the unseen middleman. And I did that for 20 years, and it was relatively successful, was making a lot of money. And coming up to about 2008, I was working for AIG Sun America, which is the variable annuity distribution arm of AIG. And at that time, AIG had about 120,000 employees. And as you know, what happened in 2008, there was a huge, crash in the market. And it resulted in some of the things that a particular department within AIG up in New Jersey was doing, and it crashed the market. A lot of companies went out of business. We ended up getting laid off. And I think I lasted about 6 or 7 months, got a measly little severance package. And it was at that point that I really started to question why I was doing this. I had loved it for 20 years. I loved the travel. I loved the entertaining and presenting, but it kind of put a bad taste in my mouth. And so from there, I lost my house. I went through a divorce, lost my car, and was forced to move up to, and it wasn't a bad thing. My brother had some property, and he had a guest house, so I was living in the guest house up in Austin, Texas, a place called Liberty Hill. And that's kind of when I was really going through this. I need to reinvent myself and do something different. And so I started contemplating or thinking about something that I wanted to do. I mean, I had nothing to lose. Literally, I had nothing to lose. So I might as well do something that I would enjoy. So I started doing voiceovers. About that time, not a whole lot of jobs, and I did kind of bounce in between jobs, go back into the wholesaling, didn't like it, and then went back to voiceovers. But long story short, I started narrating audiobooks, and I started making enough money where I could, relax a little bit, had enough money in royalties. And I actually moved up with my mom, moved into her house. I said, I really want to build up these royalties. And would you allow me to live in the house? I'll help you with, because she was getting older. I'll help you with things that need to be done around the house, that kind of thing. And she said, that's not a problem. So I lived with her about a year and a half, actually more like 2 or 3 years, and really built up the royalties. And I finally decided I was doing what I loved, and then I wanted to do something else that I've always wanted to do, and that was travel. So I
Mhm.
took about a 3-week vacation and flew out to Chongqing and just fell in love with the city. I mean, I love this city, and I've been here for 7 years now. Um, Probably about 4 or 5 days into my trip, I started to get really angry. I started to get angry with my government, the United States.
Why?
Be because everything that I had been told, and I was even warned by a family member to be careful because they might harvest my
Yeah,
organs.
harvest organs.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question. If I can interrupt here with a
Sure, sure,
question.
sure.
You just went through a storyline there where you've lost your job, you've lost your house, you've lost your marriage, you've lost your car, you were living with family, and then you moved to China, and then you got angry?
Well, there was some moments during that I played the victim.
Mm,
I hated life, I hated God, I hated everything, and was just bitter. And it was when I moved in with my mom, I said, I have to shed this bitterness, because I forgot who said, maybe it was Zig Ziglar that said, uh, hate and bitterness is like, hate and bitterness towards someone or something is like you drinking the poison and waiting for them to die. I don't know if you've ever heard that quote, but something to that effect. And that's what I was
mm,
doing. I was killing myself. And I had, a couple of, spiritual revelations and moments where I just said, I've got to change. Otherwise I'm gonna be dead of a heart attack or something. And my mom, in the bathroom that I was using, my mom's house, it was a huge mirror. It's probably like 7 feet wide and maybe 4.5, 5.5 feet tall.
right.
And I started writing inspirational quotes. And I got to the point after a couple months, the entire mirror was filled, because I was tired of looking at me. I was tired of where I was, because we look at that. Instead, I was looking at these inspirational quotes and things that I wanted to do, like go to China, go to Japan, go to all these different places, and where I wanted to be financially.
Mhm.
And it was kind of during that period that I was staying with my mom, that I just picked myself up and said, I'm going to start doing what I've always dreamed of doing. And then going back to being mad, I was mad at my government because this is 7 years ago, and I don't know if you've noticed how much Chongqing has grown, but actually, it was 8 years ago. 8 years ago, it was an amazing place. I mean, the infrastructure was just amazing. They had, a spider web of light rail systems, subway, the
Mhm.
buildings, the view, the lights, and it was during Chinese New Year, so it was packed. There were a lot of people there. And after my trip, and I returned. Actually, I had already decided during this trip that I was going to return to China, at
Right.
whatever cost. So I did some research and found out the quickest way to get a work visa is to teach. And so you've got to have a a degree. You've got to have a clean background, clean health, all that kind of stuff. Went through that whole process, which took about 5 or 6 months. I also had to get a uh,
TEFL.
TEFL certificate, which took like a month or so. Knocked that out, and so I was only back about 5 or 6 months, and I was shedding everything. I didn't want to bring anything with me. I mean, like I said, I'd already lost my house, but I had a bunch of other personal items that I had accumulated. The only thing that I was bringing with me was my computer, my mic, and some, special clothes that my son in the U.S. had given to me. And I was back September 28th, 2018, I believe, was when I arrived. And here I am. I'm married. I've got 2 children, and I couldn't be happier. And
Why Chongqing though? What brought you originally to Chongqing? I agree with you. It's a fantastic city.
Mhm.
My first time to see it was 2005. I was in my first year of working in China. Like yourself, I was made redundant, had a bit of a package. I got myself a TEFL certificate and thought I'll go and teach and travel and see the world a little bit, and got stuck in China on my first job. And in the summer holidays, I arrived here in October 2004, and in July, August the following year, I did a bit of a tour of China, and one of the stops was Chongqing with a friend of mine, an Australian friend of mine, and we were like, whoa, look at this city. But it wasn't like it is now. It was just wow, look at all the steps and the stick men, the guys going up and down the steps all
Bang
the time.
Bang Men. Yep.
Yeah. And so for me, it was a fascinating place. And we jumped on the one of the cruise boats, which was quite rustic, to say the least. They're quite luxurious now. But we got on this, the best description is a tramp steamer, and went down to the gorge, through the gorges down to the dam at Yichang. And then we went to Wuhan and had a look at Wuhan, which was another city like, wow, look at this. So what took you to Chongqing, first of all?
I'm the type of person that likes to do things differently and go to different places and explore the unexplored. And I came across Chongqing on YouTube, and I don't even remember what channel it was. And I said, I've never heard of the city. And when I started researching it, at the time, I think they had about 31 million people.
Yep.
And I'm like, I've never heard of Chongqing, and this city is this big. I've got to go check it out. So that's kind of how it came about.
Yeah, I had exactly the same revelation. Again, in that school, I was teaching a bunch of 18-year-olds. They were university preparation. I wasn't working in a language school or anything like that. I was working in an international center of an international school for a university in Australia, preparing these kids for their foundation year in Australia. And a bunch of them were having a conversation about populations, and they said, oh, the biggest city in the world is Chongqing. And I said, where's that? Never heard of it. 32 million people live there. And I said, that can't be true. I would have heard of it. Surely I've heard of it. And no, I went away and checked on it, and they were right. So for me, it was a must visit, a definite must visit. I flew in there, and I'm glad I flew in there and didn't go on my bike, because it's extremely mountainous. It's
not like Chengdu or Beijing, where you've just got in Xinjiang, where you've got bikes everywhere. There's there's the ones that you can rent. They're electric bikes, but yeah, it's not a city that you really want to ride a bike around in.
So let's move on to, I have a story about COVID in Chongqing. Now, I was in Chongqing during the COVID lockdowns. The Western media tell us we were all locked down, and we weren't. We were traveling. I traveled to over 40 different cities. But during the middle of COVID, right in the middle of COVID, I was actually in Chongqing for 10 days working in a school doing an IELTS preparation course for some teachers, not students, but I was teaching teachers how to teach for IELTS. That's the International English Language Testing System. So I became a teacher trainer rather than a teacher myself. It kind of, my career developed into that and other business things that I was doing. But the teacher training was really interesting. And I went to Chongqing, where there's a very large Canadian school, and I was working for them. So again, a lot of people say, well, that's illegal. You can't do that. Well, yeah, I can, because I was working for a Canadian company in Canada, being sent to places inside of China to do some business consultancy effectively. And I did that. Then I came back to Chongqing, city center, went to a hospital to get the certificate that says I'm COVID free in order to get on the cruise to go through the Three Gorges, which I did during COVID, the Three Gorges cruise.
Hmm.
That was my third time to do that cruise, but the hospital wouldn't let me in. The security guy says, "You can't come in here." So, what do you mean I can't come in here? He said, "You haven't got a valid certificate that you don't have COVID." I said, "Well, where do I go to get that?" He said, "The hospital." I said, "This is the hospital. Is there another hospital?" "No, you have to go to this hospital to get it." I said, "Well, can I come in and get it?" "No, because you don't have a valid code." And this was a circular argument. It just kept going round and round and round until two nurses intervened and said, "What are you talking about, you stupid security guard? Let him into the hospital to get the certificate that he needs so you can let him into the hospital."
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that was it. But we stayed in that beautiful area right across the road from an old colonial building, lovely coffee shops and Italian restaurants. And it's like, this isn't China. This is somewhere entirely different. What was it
Hmm.
like during COVID for you?
So, you and I were talking yesterday about Reporterfy, Alex,
Mm.
and he and I actually did a couple of videos together on his first visit. And it was like right after he left that we started getting wind of this new virus. And I think it was maybe about 2.5 to 3 weeks later that everything was locked down. And
Yeah.
I will admit that I agreed with the first lockdown. And a lot of, you were saying this earlier, I kind of alluded to this earlier. What a lot of people don't understand is the entire country wasn't locked down. It kind of went in waves. I mean, I remember going into Shanghai and then kind of Beijing, back to Wuhan, and it would just go in waves where, we were locked down for maybe 3 months, and then it calmed down a little bit, and then we were locked down a second time, probably 6 months later. The first time I was doing daily videos on my experience and what it was
Mm.
like. I had the choice to go back to the United States, but that at that time, my wife and I were, I didn't want to take her back because I just felt like it wasn't going to be handled very well in the United States. And remind me to go back and talk about my friend who had his parents come in. But I
Yeah.
want to finish up on the second round. The second round is when I started getting upset about it because I was still teaching, and the pay was going down. It was cut in half. I mean, we were just barely getting any money. Not that we weren't. I mean, we had done a good job of saving, so we were fine. But I didn't know how long this was going to go on. So I started
No.
considering going back into the institutional wholesaling, going back to work in the United States. And it was right when they actually, how they talked about people being locked in their houses. I'm
Mm.
sure that happened in some places where you might have an overzealous security guard or overzealous, leader in the community. Our gates were locked. We couldn't leave. Now, a lot of people say, "Well, you couldn't get food." Well, we could get food. One person can go out and get groceries every single day
Yes.
if they wanted to. You could have Meituan, which is a delivery service. You could have Meituan deliver to. We had one central location where we could go pick up our packages, but it was at that time that we were required to have daily tests. So within our neighborhood, within our complex, we were lining up to get the test, so we could have the green QR code.
Yep.
And when I saw, and actually I did a video on it, and I saw the chain on the fence, and I'm like, okay, this is getting stupid. I'm getting mad. And it was right at that time, probably the same day, if not 24 hours later, that a lot of people nationwide, a lot of Chinese people started to protest. And I don't know if you
Mm.
remember seeing the videos of them
This is
tearing down.
December
Yeah.
2020. Mm.
Yeah. So people say you can't protest. Well, I can tell you the entire nation, a lot of people said, we're done with this. And it was 24 hours later that they had lifted it lifted everything. I thought the second one, I knew it was a different strand. It had mutated so many times that it was more like a cold or flu.
Yep.
And they lifted it 24 hours later. I mean, we went down to, I don't know if you know Nanbin Lu Road. Nanbin Lu Road is just a beautiful walkway, and they
Yep.
had all these, vendors set up, chuan chuan. They were selling all sorts of food. And I looked around, I thought to myself, this is the COVID County Fair, because I just had a feeling that I had a feeling
Yes.
that I was going to get it, and not but like 48 hours later, I was in bed for about 4 days. It felt
Yeah.
like the flu. Not I've had the flu that were back when I was
Yeah.
like in ninth grade that I thought I was going to die. I was hallucinating, crazy temperature, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Took me about 2 weeks to kind of get out of the crud, and I ended up, changing my mind. I was glad to get out of the lockdowns and back to normal life. And it was
Yeah.
the only thing that you could see that was still the same as people wearing masks for, a good 6, 7, 8 months. And occasionally I'll see that, but now it's life. Life is normal. Nobody ever talks about COVID anymore. In fact, I
No.
have a theory. Tell me if you think if I'm right about this, but because there's such a big population, there's so many people that you're actually exposed to the many different variants and mutations of COVID, that your body's just constantly getting inoculated with it. Because
I,
I
I
haven't
think
had
that's
it
true of
since.
China. I've had it. I've had it twice that I know of, and I've probably had it a third time too. And each time was progressively uh, less of a problem than the previous time. The first time, I went from in December 2020. I went from not knowing anybody who knew anybody who had COVID to not knowing anybody who didn't know anyone who had COVID within 3 weeks. It literally
Wow.
from I think it was the 5th of December to
Uh-huh.
Christmas. And I actually had it over Christmas. I woke up 3 or 4 days before Christmas feeling like something wrong with my throat. This is really serious sore throat. I've had lots of
Right.
sore throats before, but this was a bad one. And I knew something was wrong. So I got a COVID test, and sure enough, I had COVID. And my wife had it too. And she had it really very lightly, but for about 10 days. And I had it
Okay.
really badly for about 3 days. I had man flu, of course. Man flu is always worse than everybody else's.
You're dying. You're dying with the man flu.
Felt I was just for a couple of days. But Christmas morning, we had plans to have friends around on Christmas, and I was cooking a goose, which is a tradition that we do. I do a Christmas pudding, and usually it's a turkey, but this year we were doing a goose. And we had it all arranged, all on order. The Christmas pudding was already made. And I woke up in the morning, and I kind of stood up, and I was like this. I could not stand up straight without falling over. So I didn't move
Jeez.
away. I was
Wow.
leaning on the wall and afraid to move away from the wall unless there was a bed there to fall on. It was like that's so dizzy. And
Wow.
it didn't get much better during the day. I just had to sit for a lot of the day, but I supervised the cooking. We had our friends come around. They'd all had COVID too, so nobody cared about it anymore, and we just
Yeah.
got on with our lives. Yeah.
I'm glad
Um,
it's over.
yeah, me too. I had another one. I was in Shanghai it was about this time last year. It's about a year ago, and I started getting a sore throat. I was in Shanghai for 2 nights, 3 days, and on the third day, I woke up with a sore throat, and I thought, this is a bit dodgy. So I went to the pharmacy, got a couple of lozenges and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And then by the time I got on the train to go home, I prefer traveling by train. I was wearing a mask because of other people rather than myself. And I just put a mask on and got on the train and sat quietly and did nothing. When I got home, I'm fairly sure I had COVID for the third time then, but it was quite mild. But it just felt not quite as bad, but very, very similar. It might have just been a flu or a cold or something. I don't know,
Right.
but it was pretty bad. Yeah, I want to move on from that now
Sure, sure.
because I think this myth of us all being locked down and welded into our apartments it's been done to death. It didn't happen, and I traveled extensively, and I'm sure you did too. Let's talk about what it was that put us together this time. You sent me a message asking me a question about religious freedoms. What are your
Okay.
views on religious freedoms in China?
Well, let me tell you about myself. I grew up in a Christian home. We went to church every single Sunday. Of course, at the younger age, you hated going, and
Yep.
I actually had what they would call, I guess, a born again experience when I was age
Mhm.
34, and it was a major life changing moment for me. Where God, wasn't this far off, distant thing that didn't really get involved in our lives and became like a personal relationship. I won't go into detail about that, but that kind of tells you where I stand and how I feel about religion here in China. My first visit, when I visited that for that 3 week period, I had that 3 week vacation. I stopped by a church. It's called the
Mm.
Agape Church. It's in, I believe, Jiafang Bay, and I ended up buying a Chinese Bible, and it's English and Chinese. And I looked to see who. I'm trying to see where it's at. Oh, it's back there on the shelf there, but I think you can barely see it. I think it's right there. But I looked to see who the publisher was, and it's Zondervan, which is a company out of the United States. Are you still there, buddy?
Yeah, yeah. A little
Okay,
distortion, but I'm still here.
seems like kind of timed out there. Now I'm out.
No, I'm
Still
still
there?
here. Are you still here?
I'm getting a lot of static
Yeah,
feedback.
we seem to have some connection problems, but according to me, it's everything is fine.
I'm still getting digital feedback. I can't hear you. Shoot me a message on WeChat to let me know if you can hear me, and I'll just keep talking.
Yeah, I can hear you. Now we seem to have frozen. Yeah, so we. So what Patrick was going to tell us there, he's going to come back in, go out and come back in now. What Patrick was trying to tell us there, and he's just sent me a voice message, which.
Hey, I was kicked out of the stream. I'm going to try to get back in.
There you go. He's kicked out of the stream, going to try and get back in. He was telling me that when he was in Chongqing, somebody sent him a message saying that it is a requirement that all churches now have a picture of Chairman Mao and or Xi Jinping, or both. So he asked me if this was true, and I said, as far as I'm aware, this is not true. I then went to my local church, not because I want to go to church. I haven't stepped into a church willingly for many, many years, but I went to my local church, found that this was not true. My local church does not have any pictures. Now, there's two reasons why I didn't take photographs of that. One is you're in a church and you need to respect that church. Now, if there had been a priest or some responsible person there, and I was able to ask and say, can I get a photograph of your church? That would have been okay. But otherwise, no, it's not I don't like to do that. I don't go into a church and say, hey, I want to take pictures of this, and take pictures of people who are doing what people do inside of churches, praying. And so I had a look around. It was open. There were people in there, but there didn't seem to be anyone of any responsibility. So the bottom line was I walked out of the church without taking any photographs. But I have then been into another church, and so that's two churches, both in Zhongshan. Now, it could be that Zhongshan is different to anywhere else, but the idea of this picture, there is a photograph going around Twitter, YouTube, and a couple of other places where there's a church which has Xi Jinping and Mao as a picture in the background in a place where the altar would normally be. If you put that picture into a Google or a Grok or one of those things, it will tell you this one looks like it's a fake. So that was the bottom line on that particular church issue. There is no church that I have ever seen that needed a photograph of Mao Zedong or Xi Jinping. They just don't exist. And life in China with Patrick is back. Let's get him back on stage. I've
Sorry
just
about
explained. That's okay. We lost you for a minute there. I just explained about the picture of the Mao and Xi Jinping being potentially a fake. I've actually, since we spoke, been into two different churches, and neither of them have a picture of Xi Jinping or Mao or both in the church. They have pictures of the Sacred Heart. They have pictures of Jesus. They have the Stations of the Cross. They have Jesus on the crucifix. They have Mary with the baby. They have all of these normal things that go along with churches. In Zhongshan, we don't have a mosque. This is one of the few cities that I've been to that doesn't have a mosque. And I have Muslim friends here. If they want to go to the mosque, they go to Guangzhou. And there's a very big mosque, one of the oldest. In fact, I think it's the oldest in China, is in Guangzhou. And I'm kind of catch up with a friend of mine who's Moroccan and a Muslim. And I'm going to ask him the question when I see him. I don't want to send it over WeChat. He's just finished his Ramadan. And the plan was when Ramadan was finished, we're going to get together and have a meal together. His wife is Chinese as well. So I'll ask him that question. But at the moment, my understanding is there is no requirement for any church anywhere to have pictures of anything other than religious icons. So you can continue with your experience now. Patrick?
And I've lost your video feed. Maybe it'll come back up in a second. I think I'm back up. All right, there we go.
You're back.
Okay. So so I was telling you that I'm a Christian myself, and I bought a Bible here, and I've been to the Agape Church many times, not as much as I wish I could go just because of my schedule and working at night a lot. But I've been to the Agape Church, and there is no Mao picture. There is no, President Xi picture. There's a big, actually, if you go on YouTube and type in Agape Church Chongqing, there's a person there that uploads videos onto YouTube. And you can see, you can watch them worshiping. And if you close your eyes, you would, it looks like a Protestant church or a Baptist church that you would see in the United States. And it's kind of a unique church that it's like on the 6th floor, but they cleared out like 2 or 3 different floors. So they have this huge auditorium. It's a beautiful church. And when you walk in, there's a massive painting of the Last Supper. I'm talking, it's probably 30 or 40 feet long, maybe, 6 feet in height. It's a beautiful painting. And I met with the assistant pastor, and I asked him if I could do some videos. And he said, no, I don't want any videos done in here. And I said, well, why is that? And he says, well, we're afraid that foreigners are going to come in here and contort some truth about the church. So I can't allow you to do it. But I ended up finding that the video of the auditorium and people singing during Easter is plastered all over it. We're talking about, I went down to Qing'aowan and Shantou and all these different places on the coast, and I did a video on it. Can you please continue with the description of the Bible? Okay, somebody just asked me ABC asked. I'll continue with that in a minute, but let me finish on the church that we went to in Qing'aowan. So we were walking, and I see this big red cross, and then I look up, and there's a temple that's got a big cross on top of a big red cross, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go in and see if I can video the auditorium, not thinking about the whole Mao thing and President Xi. And I was filming, and some of the pastors came out, and they greeted us, and I told them I was American and that I'm a Christian, and I wanted to see if I could video their auditorium. And they said, yeah, sure, come on in. So they brought me in. We went up to the 2nd floor. And when you go up to the 2nd floor, there was this is around Christmas time or right after Christmas, there was a big Merry Christmas sign with Santa Claus in the middle. Went in, and you can see, if you go back like on my X profile, I had about a 2-minute clip that I did of it, and there's no Mao pictures, there's nothing. It's just a regular church. It kind of it looked old fashioned benches.
I've lost you again, but I wanted to comment on Atlanta Bill's. If you can hear me, it's okay. I wanted to comment on Atlanta Bill's comment about the cult personality. And that's actually written into the constitution of the Communist Party of China, that there must be no personality of cult. And there are a lot of communists who say, we don't want this, we don't like this. I've been to Chairman Mao's hometown, and it is a cult. It almost is. You can see queues of people to the statue going up there. They're taking flowers. They've had to make it in such a way now that you book your time, because so many people want to take flowers to visit Chairman Mao's. And it's not his mausoleum. This is just his hometown, his birthplace. The home he was supposed to have grown up in is still there. I don't know if it's the same home or just a fake home that made it look like, but it's still there. And there's a huge square, and inside of the square, either side of the square, there's shops selling accoutrements, Mao hats, Mao badges, Mao clothes, Mao t-shirts. I've got one, and a few other different things. But there's also thousands of people laying flowers or wreaths at the foot of the statue of Mao. And that is what the Communist Party doesn't actually like, but they can't stop these people. So they're controlling them. They're not stopping them. They're controlling them, saying, okay, if you want to do this, you can, but you have to book a time. You book the place, and and there are police there. There's military there. And every morning you go up and you queue up to pay your respects to the. Now, because of China's concept of ancestor worship, this is actually the right thing to do. Today is Qingming. They call this tomb sweeping day. Today is the day. Then we do this, and we go out to the family grave. We clean the grave up, and then we have a feast in the evening, and we celebrate. But one of the things that my wife's mother does is she has a little altar at home, and pictures of parents, grandparents, and stuff, and we all have to do that. Even me. And I'm not a believer in Chinese. I'm a great believer in Chinese culture, so I follow it. But it keeps my mother-in-law happy, and we always have a nice meal. It's a great day today. So yeah, the ancestor worship and the cult are kind of overlapping each other. So anyway, sorry, carry on with. I lost you for a couple of minutes, so I went off with a different story. But carry on with your description of the Bible.
No, that's okay. No problem. And ABC, I'm going to answer your question in a minute about the Bible, because I think there's something important to talk about regarding that. But in every church, long story short, in every church that I've been in, I've never seen a Mao picture. I've never seen a President, Xi picture. Now, there may be a very patriotic pastor that has a picture of Mao or President Xi in their office, but I've never seen one in the auditorium. I've never seen one in a pastor's office, but it's not to say that it's not out there. I think you're the one that sent me the PRC Constitution.
I did.
Okay. So I read Article 37, and it's very short, and it makes it actually very clear that you can't force someone to worship a certain deity or have faith in a certain religion. So to say that President Xi or Mao should be worshipped would be going against the Article 37, and it could have
constitution.
Yeah, of their own constitution. So it could have some legal ramifications. I mean, if they were doing that, you'd have the entire, church membership in an uproar, because
and probably the Communist Party too.
Yeah. So, it's just typical Western media blowing things out of proportion. Yeah. I want to go back to ABC. So ABC, it was a Zondervan Bible. It was actually shipped in from the United States. So, and they have a bookstore that has stacks and stacks of these Bibles that you can buy. You can buy, all Chinese, or you can have Chinese and English. And I've read through the Bible, and a lot of times you hear people say that they're changing the doctrine of the Christian faith, saying that you've got to worship Mao or you got to worship President Xi, and that's not true at all. It's all the only difference between this Bible and a Bible that you might buy in the United States is whenever Jesus talks, whenever they're quoting Jesus, it's in red. In this Bible, it's not red. It's just, black ink. And I've gone through the doctrine, and it's the same it's a New International Version Bible, which is a Bible that a lot of Christians in the United States read. So it's all a farce when they
have they modernized the language. I have to be honest here. I haven't set foot in a church willingly since I was 13. I rebelled against organized religion when I was a child, much to my mother's disgust. Have they modernized the Bible, and so there's not so much of the these and the thous and the so and so begat so and so?
Yeah, you're talking about You're talking about the King James version.
King
That's the
James,
King
yeah,
James version is the one that has the these, the thous, and there's some diehard King James versions Christians that only read from that Bible. But
yeah.
what I find, living in the United States, most people, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of people read the NIV, the New International Version, which is it's updated. The doctrine hasn't changed. It's
Mhm.
just in today's vernacular as opposed to the these and thous.
Okay, so a question with a yes or no answer, but I'm sure you're not going to give me a yes or no answer. Is there religious persecution or religious oppression in China, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, no.
No, that's my knowledge too. Have you been to Xinjiang? Have we lost you again? So it does look like we've lost Patrick again. I was going to talk about Xinjiang. I've been to Xinjiang. I've been to a mosque. I've been to several mosques, but I haven't been in them because I'm not a Muslim. And consequently, I don't go inside. I can go outside. And in Xi'an, there's a huge
Testing
mosque
one, two,
in the
three.
Muslim quarter. Oh, you're back, Patrick. We lost you
I'm
again.
back. I'm back again. I've got my
Right.
phone up, so if it goes down again, I'm going to go into my phone and see if it's any different. But
Okay.
no, as far as I have not been to Xinjiang, but I followed it. I followed several. I know you and I talked about. I don't know I don't think Mario had been there, but who's the guy from South America? I just went like.
Fernando.
Yes, Fernando.
Yeah.
I know Fernando had spent 3 or 4 months up there, and he and I had talked before, and he's never seen anything, and he went to the supposed satellite picture places and didn't see anything. Um, you're free to be what you want. I mean, if you want to worship a blue pail, you can, but you're free to do what you want here in China. The only thing that
Yeah.
I don't like, and this isn't actually brought up a lot, is they don't want children going to churches or going
Correct.
to
Yeah.
mosque. It's up until about age 18 to let them make the decision. Now, that does not keep you from, they don't restrict you from teaching your faith to the children at home. And that's what I do with my kids. I mean, a lot of times
Mhm.
I pray over them when they're sick and lay hands on them. And we talk about Jesus and who
Right.
Jesus is. And I talk about Jesus with my wife. She's not Christian, but I have the freedom to do that and not have to worry about the Chinese Gestapo coming in and hauling me off somewhere.
No, in your
That's
home,
a
you can do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in your home you can do that. And I've got a crucifix that my oldest son in America gave me when he went to the Vatican. I have that, on one of the shelves out in the open. I've seen when I was teaching. I don't know if you know Shindong Feng, which is New
Yeah.
Oriental
New Oriental
training school.
College
Yeah.
School. Yeah.
I don't know why I saw this often, but when I was teaching there 4 or 5 years ago, I would often see women or men opening up their Bibles and reading their Bibles out in the
A lot of
open. So,
Christians. Yeah.
mhm. So there's
Yeah.
not no
I,
restrictions as
I
far.
was I was in Xinjiang before I became a YouTuber. I was a cyclist, and my first major cycling trip was through Xinjiang. Now, had I gone to Xinjiang today, I would have a very different view. I went there and I took photographs and videos of us cycling. It never occurred to me to look at the geopolitical aspects of it and the I don't know what you call it, the anti-narrative of Xinjiang. And all I did was just have a nice time. And I cycled through Xinjiang and I met hundreds of Uyghurs, hundreds of
Mhm.
Kazakhs, Tajiks, Mongols, you name it, they're all there. And lots of Han Chinese. And I mean, for me, every single person I spoke to, because I didn't like the security there, I have to be honest. We like our freedoms, and here you have to go through all kinds of checks. It's the only city in the world I've ever gone through a security check when I got off the plane as well as getting on the plane. So you get off
Wow.
the plane and you go through a security check where they wand you down, you put your bags in the X-rays, and then they take details and photographs of your passport, photographs of you, and then you're into the city. It's the only place. And I asked several people, what do you think about all the security? And the answer for every single one of them was the same. It's so much safer now. Nobody wants it to be like this, but it is so much safer. So from that perspective, I really, really appreciate what they've done. So I think we've lost you again. Oh dear. Oh dear. We've lost you again.
I'm back.
Oh, you're back. Great.
You know,
So
it wouldn't surprise me if there's, some spooks on the other end screwing with this connection. It just wouldn't surprise me. But that's a whole nother. So we can talk about spooks in a little bit and the crap that I get from those people.
yeah, I'm seeing a couple of CCP comments coming in
Oh
there.
yeah. See, it's
Yeah,
I don't see the comments, but I'll say it's CPC, not CCP.
exactly. All right. So yeah, neither of us are joining the CCP or the CPC. Neither of us are Chinese citizens. We cannot join the Communist Party of China. So it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Let's move on. What's your wife's social credit score, Patrick?
She doesn't know about social. I asked her when I first heard about this whole social credit score thing. I asked her about it, and she goes, "What are you talking about?" Then I asked another friend, the Chinese friend. I asked the Chinese family. I've asked a lot of Chinese people about their social credit score. Now, I will say they do have a similar credit scoring system as the United States, but they
Yes.
don't have this. I've heard
Financial credit score.
yeah, I've heard extremes where, if you cross the street, I mean, there's cameras everywhere, but if you cross the street when you're not supposed to, that it's going to reduce your social credit score. I've even been accused of, every time I make a post, how much does your social credit score go up? But that's a total lie. That's a Western media fabrication that makes it look like China's controlling every single thing that people do in this country. And that's not the case. But yeah, I've never heard of it. How about you?
I don't have one. My wife doesn't have one. None of my wife's family have one. When I ask, they just laugh. But I have this theory, and so far this theory has proven to be correct many, many times. For every story that we hear, there's 2% of truth. 2% of truth. My wife and I are used to be very actively involved in the disabled community here in Zhongshan. We've raised a lot of money for them. We cycled across China on their behalf and had activities to raise money while we were doing that. And so we've been involved with the community. Now, when you do something for the community, you have a choice. There is an app that you can volunteer on. Now, what this means is this is the social credit score. What happens is this app is available to anyone and everyone on a voluntary basis. And I've been invited to join this app, and I said no. My wife has said no. It's no benefit to us at all. If you do good things for your community, then your community will do good things back for you. So if you log into this app and register that something you're doing is going to take this many hours, you log in and you log out again when you're finished, and it goes into an administrative function, and there are people in there who say, yeah, I witnessed this. I know these. There's always someone. It's a very well organized app. There's always someone there to check on things. So you can't just make it up. So if you want to go street clean, for example, you can just go out and clean the streets. But if you go onto this app and go street cleaning, someone will check that you're actually doing it, take a photograph of you, and it's proof that you've done it. And now, because you have contributed to society, then you will get some benefit from society. So if you have children and you want them to go to that special school, then you've got more points. And there's not actually points. You don't get points, but you get kudos. And you're recognized as being someone who's contributed to the community. And if there's 2 places at that school, and there's 4 kids want to go there, your kid is more likely to get it than someone who hasn't contributed to the community. So in that respect, there are benefits to being in this system. It's not called a social credit score. And there is a social credit system. It does actually exist. It's real, but it's for businesses. How do businesses interact with their communities? And again, it's voluntary. Businesses can get into it. And it's called the social credit score in English. It really is real. So there is always a couple of percentage of truth. Now, if a company, a corporation does something positive, then they can go onto this app for their social credit score and they can increase their community kudos. That's all that the social credit score is. And yes, you can go to the bank, press the right buttons on the machine and get a copy of your credit score. It's free, it's current to that day, and it tells you what your credit score is so that you can then go and borrow money to buy a car or something like that.
Right.
That's what that's what the credit score is. There is that system in public places where they actually monitor jaywalkers and things like that. And there's a bit of a name and shame. I saw someone put this into the comments there, name and shame, where they don't name you, but they'll put your picture onto a big screen above the crossing that you've just illegally crossed. And of course, everyone looks and goes, look at you. And that's just public humiliation, which means that they lose face. Mianzi is very, very important in China, the face. Have I lost you again? I have. So what happens is we lose face if we do something wrong. And having lost face, then we modify our behavior. So we're going to add another Patrick in China and remove this one. How are you doing with this one?
I think hopefully better. Yeah, it's kind of.
Slightly
can you see me?
View, but at least we're back. We're back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now I'm back on the other one as well. Just keep me on. Hold on. Let me mute myself. So we're not getting an echo.
Yeah.
I'm getting an echo. Hold on.
I've got you off. I can bring you back on, but you're off and muted at the moment.
All right, hold on. Let me check my.
There is a little echo.
Let's see here.
That's okay.
Can you bring me back in the other stream?
That one?
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why we have the echo.
Okay, let's do this. Is that better?
No, we still have the echo.
Okay.
Now we've lost your sound altogether. You've muted both.
Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. No echo on your side?
No echo on my side. So let's just move that one off and we can come back to that if there's another problem.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
And it's echoes on, no echo on my side. So yeah, it's, I don't know. Have you had this kind of trouble on doing your live streams?
No, but this is the first live stream in a long time.
Okay.
I went off and maybe I should put in a little explanation. In October last year, I went into hospital for a short period of time. And when I came out of hospital, I was under very strict instructions not to sit at my desk for too long, which is the problem that put me into hospital. I got thrombosis in my left leg.
Wow.
So that caused me to kind of rejig what I was doing. And I had to get rid of a couple of other things that I was doing. I do some business consultancy. I used to do some business training, and I used to do some private teaching. And I've stopped all of that now. I don't do any of that. And this is all I do. So as of now, I'm coming back to at least one a week on live stream. But for a period of time, I did probably between October and today, I've probably only done maybe half a dozen live streams because of that. I've also been traveling. I went to Sri Lanka. I went to Laos. I've been to Beijing. I've had kind of 6 or 7 weeks in the last few months away from home. So a lot less time. And anyway, somebody else put another social credit system. Let me just put this up and see. How does the social credit system relate in theory and practice with the bureaucratic system? No. The simple answer to this question, Bill, is that there is no social credit system. The theory is that we are all required to log in and tell people what we're doing. The practice is that if you want to, you can log into something that benefits you in your community. If you don't want to, you don't have to. It's very much a Confucianism system. If you work for the community will work for you. It's actually communal. And that's what China was long before communism, much more communal than, say, the individualism of the West. That's something I want to write about as well, but that's another story. One last final question, Patrick, that I really am interested in. Currently, there are a lot of Americans in America who are kind of biased towards Chinese people who are in America. And I wanted to ask you, did you have or have you experienced any problems as a Chinese person, as an American person living in China with any form of racism, anything that has caused you to have any concerns being in China?
The closest I've had something happen because I was a foreigner was the second round of the lockdowns. Every day I would go walking through the compound just to get some exercise, get some fresh air, and there was hardly anybody outside. And so I said, I'm going to take off my mask. And I took off my mask, and this older gentleman comes out, who I'd never seen before. And I know a lot of people here within the complex, but I'd never seen him before. And he comes out and he starts just in Chinese yelling at me, telling me to put on my mask, that I'm endangering everybody. And I kind of got into a little argument with him. And we were doing the social distancing fighting, verbally with each other. And then I walked a little bit further, and then another person did that. And then another person did it. And then somebody that was kind of the volunteer to monitor, to make sure people were wearing masks and all that kind of stuff, came up to me and said, "You need to put on your mask." And I'm said, I was 20 feet away from this guy, several meters away from this guy. Why are you picking on me? And that was probably the only time. And I don't think it wasn't like a racist thing. But what I found out later is that guy didn't know that I lived within the complex, and that I had been locked in with everybody and had never made it outside. And so it was an overreaction on his part. He actually ended up coming over and apologized, and I apologized to him. And now I'll see him quite often, and we'll say hello in Chinese, and that's about it. But
now you're mates.
Yeah. Now we're mates. But I've never had, I still don't know the language well enough to know if somebody's, you hear this all the time. Oh, look, Lo Wai or Wai Goren. Yeah, but I don't consider that, a racist thing at all. But I've never experienced any type of racism where I could, determine that that's what it was. So no, I feel safe here. I mean, I really, America's they're all about guns, and I'm not opposed to owning guns, but here they don't allow guns, and I actually feel safer here than I would in the United States. And
I feel the same thing. When was the last time you went back to the United States?
So the last time I went back was last year. My mom, a lot of people probably don't know this, but my mom came down with a cancer, and she was given just a few months to live. So I went and had a chance to visit her for about a month, and then came back to China and started working on the travel visas to bring my family so they could meet her before she passed away, meet her in person. I mean, we chatted with family. So my family here had met her, but I wanted them to meet her in person. And we were talking about this last night, talking about getting flack from your own government. When we applied for the travel visas, we applied an emergency travel visa so we could expedite the process, kind of go ahead of everybody. And we even had a letter. I had a letter from my mom's oncologist that said, she could die in the next month, expedite the travel visa. And my own government rejected the emergency travel visa. And I had a couple of, flaming posts towards my government. Well, I ended up deleting them because I was like, I wasn't thinking, I didn't want it to become this vicious thing where I was just bitter, even more bitter about what my government's doing. So I deleted them, but I was not happy with that. But to answer your question, we went back in the summer and we stayed in America for about 3 weeks. It was a great trip. Biggest difference that I could see as far as traveling between our two countries, it cost us close to, I'd say, about $9,000. So you're looking at airfare, the occasional hotel. Most of the time we stayed with family, flying from different places in America. And it's way too expensive. I mean, the food, we went to IHOP, which is a famous pancake house, and
Okay.
there was just 4 of us. So the 2 kids, me and my wife, and it cost us about $115. That was with the tip. We ate at a just kind of a rundown fish shack on the coast of California, and it was like $150. And I was just dumbfounded at how expensive it is. Whereas here, I can afford, I'm kind of going off in left field, a little rabbit trail, but I think it's important people hear this. This past Chinese New Year, I took, it was me, my wife, the 2 kids, and my in-laws. We went down to the coast, stayed there for 20 days. Now, we didn't stay in the same place. We kind of, danced around, went around to different hotels and places. And the total cost of that trip was probably around $3,000. And I'm telling you, we stayed in nice hotels with beautiful views. We ate, to our heart's content, drinks, everything included, the fun stuff that the kids want to do. And it cost us less than $3,000. And you just can't, unfortunately, you just can't do that in the United States. It's way too expensive. And that's one of the reasons why I like living here.
Hung Tuar has just made this comment. I was in Hong Kong 2 days ago, just an overnight stop. I had a couple of meetings and then came back. 1 day in Hong Kong is more than I spend in 1 month in Zhongshan. It's really as simple as that. It's that expensive. We had a nice lunch. I was lucky. Somebody else paid for the lunch, but we're talking in the terms of thousands for a lunch of Hong Kong dollars. Yesterday, just going on from this story, yesterday, my wife and I decided to walk around the corner. There's a new restaurant opened up. It's a little bit posh, and we thought we'll give it a try. So we walked around the corner, and just as we're walking in, we saw my wife's cousin and wife, and they're driving past us on an electric bike, just coming back from the market. And they happen to live around the corner. I didn't even know this. My wife's cousin lives around the corner, and they're living in a building above where we were going for lunch. So we know them well, but I had no idea they lived so close to me. So we said, well, join us for dinner. Oh, okay. So 4 of us went for dinner, and we had 8 dishes because we all wanted to try different things. So 8 dishes, which means that we also have enough food left over for today's lunch, which will be happening very soon after we finish this conversation. So completely enough food for 2 meals. And the bill was 320 RMB. That is less than, what's that? 7 RMB is $1. So 350 is 100. So 4 of us had 8 dishes, and it was a very, very good meal. Very good meal, and enough for 2 meals. So that's how expensive it is to live here in Zhongshan.
Yeah, well, just 3 nights ago, myself, wife, and the 2 kids, we went to it's a Dongbei restaurant. So Dongbei is kind of up northeast, and they have a different cuisine there. And my wife ordered all this food. I'm like, you ordered way too much. How much is it? And it was maybe 80 kwai. So it's probably around $10, and we still have.
That's a lot of dumplings.
We didn't have any dumplings. We had
Really?
I forget the name of the meat. The sweet. It's a sweet meat, baby. What's the sweet meat? Dongbei guobao roll. It is so good. It is so good. But we had enough food to last, to do 2 or 3 days worth of leftovers. So it's cheap. I mean, my family sometimes asks me, well, when are you coming back? And I'm like, I'm not. I mean, I want to come back and visit my family, but when I can work 25 hours a week, 30 hours a week, do my own little, traveling and filming, and you can eat for super cheap and you can travel for super cheap. And I mean, I feel like I'm semi-retired, even though I'm 55 and not retired yet, but I have a good life here, and I I love.
I am retired here, and my life is equally as good. I've got a pension coming from my British police days, and I have my Australian superannuation, which I cashed in, and I live off the income from that. And I get very little bit of income from this type of thing and some writing.
Mhm.
We were talking about, I think it's a privilege that I live in China. I'm very, very lucky. I feel lucky. And obviously, from what you said, so do you. The reason I asked that question, there's a big debate going on in the comments about racism. Fernando is in there. And
Hey, Fernando.
he mentioned that we still call people in China, they call black people Hei Ren, which literally means the color black, Hei, and Ren, black person.
Yeah.
But he and I have never been described as Bai Ren, white person. And I wonder if that is a racism or if that is simple descriptive language. I do know for a fact that a lot of Chinese people view black people differently if you have black colored skin. But I'll tell you that just recently, iSpeed has been in China. You would know that. He's been in Chongqing. I think he's in Hong Kong now, so he's on his way out. But the fact is, he has done more. I haven't been following this. I'm a little annoyed about some of the things, particularly I found out that his translators are all Taiwanese. So there's a little bit of an issue about some of the translation issues. He's been misinformed about some things. But overall, it's been extremely positive. And it's amazing how many followers he has inside of China on this banned YouTube platform that we have. But he's huge inside of China. For me, it's not Min Chen has put this comment, it's not a privilege that I live in China. It's China's privilege that I'm here. I would completely and totally disagree with that, Min Chen. Sorry to do that to you, but I feel that China has made me welcome, and therefore China is my home. Now, the reason I was asking you, Patrick, about going back to America, I wanted to ask you, when you're in America, and I'm not talking about your immediate family who all know you live in China, do you tell people that you live in China, or do you self-censor? And why?
No, I would tell people. So my oldest brother lives. So I've got a brother that's in Medford, Oregon, and another one. He has a vacation house in Grants Pass, which is, about 30, 40 miles from Medford. And that's out in the country. It's out in the mountains, beautiful views, the Rogue River runs right by their house. And I would test people. Actually, sometimes the stores that I would walk into, they would say, I haven't seen you before. Where are you from? I said, well, I live in China. I'm from Texas originally. And they go, oh, you're from China. Really? So I've always wanted to go there. Most people that I met, that we had a conversation about China, they were very interested in having a dialogue.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you and I deal with the military industrial complex. We deal with the media. We deal with these warmongering politicians in Washington. But I think for the most part, Americans are very interested in China. Now, I did have a conversation with a guy that thought he knew everything about China. And as we had conversations, I had to really restrain myself and not get irritated with him. But I would just ask him questions like, so where did you get this? Well, I heard it on CNN. I thought you didn't trust CNN. And he says, well, I don't. I said, well, so why do you trust them when it comes to China information? And he says, I never thought about that. And they started you could tell that matrix was starting to open, and they were starting to question what they had been taught. But I think for the most part, Americans are genuinely interested in in China. On the flip side, though, we've talked about this before on X. X has these, they call them X spaces, and they're like these giant conference calls. They're not like a video like this, but it's a live conversation. And just about everyone that I've gone into, and I usually go into the ones that are geopolitical, world news, American news, national news, whatever. And it's inevitable that China's brought up in the discussion, and it's inevitable that people talk about China that they know nothing about. So I would just listen to these guys and go, okay, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. And I finally started going into these spaces and speaking. And I don't know why it's like this in these spaces, but I find that, I mean, I got kicked out of spaces before I even got a chance to speak. I got attacked. I mean, it was like a zombie horde of China haters telling me
Right.
I'm a traitor. I had a guy threaten me. It led me to another space, Jordan Daly. He's got like 1.2 million followers.
Yep.
And I kind of had about a 10-minute Jerry Maguire speech about what China was really like and what the lies were all about. And he says, I got a guy that wants you to debate. And we ended up setting up, an X space just for this debate, and debated the guy. And it turned into the same thing. It turned into, I'm a traitor. I'm, betraying my country. We have a son. My wife and I got married, and we have a 4-year-old son. And I'm betraying my own genes and race. It's just, there's a lot of racism, unbelievable, crazy, bizarre racism that is happening in the United States, especially on these platforms. And I just, for some reason, I felt compelled, even though it's brutal and frustrating sometimes. I go in there and I try to do the best that I can possibly do to destroy the lies and everything that's going on.
The thing is, you're not going to change the mind of someone who is a racist. What you are going to do is anyone who's listening to that with a critical thinking skill of any degree is going to say, hang on, that makes a bit of sense. What he just said makes sense. Let me look at that a little further.
That's happened.
They're the ones who win.
That's happened where I've been in these spaces, and in some of these spaces, I'll gain 50 to 100 new followers. And that's my intention of going in there, because I know all these people that I'm debating, they're, I think they're either spook puppets, or they're working in the defense industry, and a war with China wouldn't be bad for business, or they're just genuinely stubborn, obstinate, and don't want to hear the truth. But there are people that are reaching out to me through direct messages saying, hey, I really enjoyed your space, and you brought a lot of things to light that I'm beginning to question. So, what's funny is America is going through a really challenging time right now, even with this new administration that's in there. People are figuring out that they've been duped, that they've been psyoped for the past 30, 40 years. There's my son in the background. Hey, buddy, go back outside, okay? They've been duped, and it's like they're finally taking the red pill, but they're only taking half of it, because they're realizing, you get the JFK files. You've got, now there's rumors that Hitler was moved down to Argentina. I haven't gone too much down that rabbit trail. You've got the Epstein files. People are realizing that the CIA has been responsible for a lot of death and destruction over this planet. But when it comes to China, the minute that China is mentioned in a conversation in these X spaces, it's all of a sudden they go into that minion phase where they're like, yes, hate China, hate China, hate China. But there are people that are beginning to realize that they've been lied to about everything, including China. And we just got to get one person at a time. If I get one person to think differently, I'm not asking them to change their beliefs all in one moment, because it took me several years of research and understanding that, like Tiananmen Square, I kind of had shelved that. I compartmentalized it because I had been told Tank Man had been run over. I had been told all these things about Tiananmen Square, but is it Kanthan? KL Kanthan? He's on X Space. Or X, he's on X.
S.L. Kanthan.
Yeah, thank you. S.L. Kanthan. He had done some research on Tiananmen Square. There's a colonel that I had a conversation with about a CIA coup, and it looks very much like the CIA was doing a coup in Tiananmen Square. I don't know if you know this, but George Soros, who everybody hates. I mean, whether you're Republican or maybe some Democrats like him, I don't know, but just about everybody hates and knows what an evil individual he is. His organization was in Beijing, and he was kicked out right after Tiananmen Square. So the Chinese figured out George Soros. So if I can get Americans to say, okay, I hate George Soros. The Chinese don't like George Soros. Maybe they know something that I don't know. Maybe I should look into it more. But it's just about, sharing facts and logic with these people that will hopefully win them over. And, I don't know
Yes.
how many people are going to be willing to go down that path, but if we can hit one person at a time, and maybe that one person knows the person in Washington that can change the way Marco Rubio behaves towards China, or the way
I had an
Lindsey Graham.
email. I got an email a couple of days ago from a guy who basically said, I've been a follower of Serpent ZA since he was living in China and positive about China. And he said, I'm starting to question him, and I've got a couple of questions for you. Can you tell me about this and this? And I wrote back with links, and I gave a long reply, sent it back. And he immediately, I'm talking about 20 minutes later on my Substack, I got a new paid subscriber, just like that. So, and it was him. You convinced me straight away. Wow, this is fantastic. I don't publicize that I'm on Substack or anything like that. I only have a couple of thousand followers on TikTok, Substack. I'm on here, and I'm on Twitter. One of the things that I think is probably a great thing to hear from you is that when you go back to America, people there are nice to you. They're interested in China. And that gives me a little bit of hope, certainly some satisfaction, because I only see America through the lens of Twitter and or X. And believe me, that is not a very good lens. What you're saying there is correct. The minions, we hate China, China bad. Everything you know about China on X from the American side is wrong. And everything we say, which corrects that, is immediately suspect. You're living in a Potemkin village. This is the world's largest Potemkin village, if that's the case. Chinese people only like their government because they're brainwashed. Okay, so you brainwashed 1.4 billion people? I just don't get it. You get all of these things. So it's really, really, for me anyway, satisfying. When I go to the UK, I have exactly that. I tell people I live in China, and they're, oh, really? That's interesting. I go to Australia, I tell people I live in China, they all want to fight me. I wouldn't dare open my mouth in a bar in Australia, a hotel as they call them over there, whereas I would quite happily do so in the UK. Australia is even worse than my impression of America. Your experience of America has actually changed my impression.
Well, that's good. I mean, American people, they're good people. They've just been psyoped and misled with disinformation for decades. Yeah. And it's not to say there's not racism there. I've been into plenty of X spaces that, the racism, I had to get out of the space yesterday because it was just so bad. And there was actually people from China in this space, and they were cussing at them, and they were calling them ching chong, and then talking, in a Chinese accent, just blatant racism. It's there. Maybe being there in person, people, it's kind of like, I don't know if you ever heard the saying, you're a tough guy with the windows rolled up and the doors locked. When you're in an X space, there's anonymity that protects you, that gives you
tough as you want.
Yeah, exactly. So it's still there, but I had positive experience. My wife had a positive experience. The kids had a positive experience. What I get the question from my family and friends, they say, well, why don't you move back and let them go to school? And, I would have to go back into the investment industry where I was working 60, 70 hours a week, traveling to make the money to be able to live there. But one of the things that's very important to me is how conservative China is. And, the past administration, we had to deal with this crazy wokey bunch brigade that was, terrorizing the schools or controlling the schools. And in China, we don't have to worry about the wokey bunch. We don't have to.
One of the reasons I left the UK was, in fact, probably the main reason I left the UK is my kids, who at the time were 5 and 3 when I left the UK in 1987. Their school sent out a memo to all the parents saying that starting on this particular day, we're going to have full-time security guards, 24/7 security guards in the school. The cost is this. Can you please donate to the school to help us? And I just, if we need security 24/7 in my kid's school, we're in the wrong place. And
Yeah.
that was 30 miles east of London in Essex. It was pretty bad. Now, I'm going to wrap it up here with a couple of comments. Dude, you talk
Sure.
with girls in bars, not politics. Don't tell my wife I talk with girls in bars. She will kill me. But no, in Australia, you don't go to bars to pick up girls. You might go to nightclubs, but hotels are where you just go and you sit at the bar and you chat with the neighbor. Where do you live, mate? Where do you come from? And you say, oh, I'm living in China. What are you doing living in China? That's the comment that I mean. So there was that one. Fernando made the comment a little while ago, which I had up there, that we're brainwashed in China. And I think Radio Free Asia, Voice of America, has made America look great to Chinese people. And we have to remember, all Chinese people remember poverty. And I'm talking about everyone who is an adult. My wife was born, she's 50 years old. She was born into a shack, which had bark roof, no running water, a well out the front. And we're talking about in the 1970s here. You know, when we were living in high-rise apartments in London, my wife was born into a shack. So they have experienced poverty. So for them, when they read about, hear about, see images of America, they think it's pretty good. And it is pretty good compared to what they had. So there's very much a little bit of misunderstanding about America and what it is. I think China is now, particularly places like Chongqing and Shenzhen, far more advanced than anything America's had. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I would agree. You know, talking about your family, my wife, she grew up in Dongbei, and she, both her parents, they owned kind of it was a convenience store, but it had hardware, it had kind of everything. And I just remember she was telling me how much they worked. I mean, they worked very hard. They had a small apartment. So even my wife, who's, you know, younger than I am, they had a difficult life. And it's this generation that is experiencing this. You know, I think it's past the critical mass of this exponential growth that they're seeing in the country, and the luxuries that you could only see by TV. You could only see Americans or the Western world living in it. But here, you know, it's like the George Jetsons now. I mean, it's the cars, the EVs, how cheap they are, the high-speed train, the access to transportation, whether it's through DD, which is kind of like the Uber, light rail system, taxis. I mean, they've gone in a very short period of time from being, like you said, backwoods to a well-developed nation, and they still have a lot to work on, but they've just had this exponential growth that is just dumbfounding me. I mean, every day I look outside and I see the tall buildings and all the things that I have access to, and I'm just dumbfounded at how quickly these things have happened. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, it's perfect. You didn't interrupt me. That's perfect. It's a good point to finish on. I think we're both of us. Life in China was the theme for today. We're both of us pretty happy with life in China, and I think on that positive note, I don't think you mentioned Meituan, did you? That's probably the only thing I would say is so fantastic. The home delivery service.
Yeah.
We don't go shopping anymore. Everything's brought here. It costs 1 or 2 RMB, and those guys are doing okay. I check with them from time to time. When the weather's foul, they get tips from us, and tipping is not a culture here. You don't have to do it. They get paid 1 or 2 RMB for a delivery, and they're bringing stuff. My wife will go shopping online. 15 minutes later, everything's delivered. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Meituan. Fantastic.
Here's one for you. My youngest, the 4-year-old, he got a hold of my wife's phone, and he went on Taobao. Yeah, he went on Taobao, and he wanted a new hammer. So he ordered himself it was a nice big hammer. And then he wanted a socket set. He ordered a socket set. And then he's 4 years old. He ordered 2 more. We have 3 brand new hammers and a socket set. And I'm thinking, okay, I love tools. This could work out really good for Dad. So my wife's had to change her password so he wouldn't get into it. I do have
That's
if
cute.
I'm not for sure if you're going to go into anything else, but I do just have something that I would like to say to the audience
Sure.
that's watching. So, but I mean, if, did you have any other questions, or you want to go
No,
down
no.
any other?
You
Okay.
let's wind it up with your last words.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I really do
You're
appreciate
very
it.
welcome.
And for everybody that's watching this live, or anybody that may come in after the fact, uh, I love my country. I love the United States. I don't love what's going on, even with the current administration. There's some things that they're doing that I don't agree with, and especially their stance on China. Um, I live in China because it's a great place to live. I mean, as I was saying earlier, I mean, you can travel for really cheap and not break the bank. I can go to the hospital. I've had 2 MRIs since I've been here, and each one of those, I got in that day to get the MRI. I met with a specialist that day, and then the following week, I had to have some procedures done. But I don't have to wait a month, and I don't have to worry about. And I do have it. I have insurance, and I could have turned that $60 MRI in and got reimbursed for a portion of it, but I didn't, because I just
No.
didn't want to mess with it. But medically speaking, I mean, you can go down the street to a pharmacy and buy Zithromax, a Z-Pack, which is a very strong antibiotic. You don't have to have a prescription. There's a lot of things that you can buy with no prescription. So, and then you're talking about Meituan. You can order these things on Meituan. So if you're feeling like crap and you want to order something to help you sleep and make you feel better, you can order it and it's delivered within 20 or 30 minutes. I mean, the convenience of living here is just amazing. I really appreciate China's stance on geopolitics. I mean, I think I've posted before. I know Jason and some other people that live in China have posted these charts that show how many countries America has invaded in the past 40 or 50 years. And it's got like 20 or 30 different countries they've invaded or psyoped or couped or whatever, color revolutionized. And China's only had like one in the past 40 years that they've had a conflict with. America's got 800 bases worldwide. They have anywhere between I don't know the exact number, but I know it's between 300 and 400 military bases surrounding China. And I always ask this question in these X bases: how would America feel if China had 10 bases in Mexico, 2 bases in the Caribbean, and then a couple of bases in Canada? How would America react to that? And you'd have all the, Marco Rubio screaming Monroe Doctrine and throwing a hissy fit. The United States, they sail on the coast of China often, anywhere from about 6 to 12 times a year. They have flights from those fleets. They also have flights from Japan that fly. They use I forget the name of I forget the spy plane, but there's a spy plane. They literally fly thousands of missions over the past couple of years. My country, and I had Grok check this out for me, but the United States has spent over $3 billion the past 10 years on anti-China propaganda to psyop the American citizens that China is the enemy. And I'm telling you, China is not the enemy. China, I use this, I don't know if I used this analogy the other day, and I don't mean this analogy in a derogatory way at all, but I'm a big Star Trek fan. I don't know if you watch Star Trek, but Deep Space Nine was kind of my favorite series. And in Deep Space Nine, they had the Ferengi, and the Ferengi, they weren't a warmongering nation. They were about profit. They were about building. They were about making money. And I kind of equate the Chinese to the Ferengi. In how much they like making money. They like building stuff and contributing and making money off of that. So, whenever you hear something in the news, whether it's CNN, Fox News, I don't care what side of the fence it's on, you need to question it. And you just you gotta drop it. You gotta take the rest of the red pill, and you gotta follow people like Jerry. You gotta follow people like Fernando. Follow myself. There's Arnaud Bertrand. You've got Daniel Dumbrill. You've got all these people that live here or have, and another guy, Carl Jaw, I had we had a debate together with that in that X space.
Good.
But there's people out there who live here or have lived here or from here and can share the truth with you. I often get accused of being a shill. And if you go to my X space, I had Grok drop a picture that shows me in a CCP jacket. And that's all that is. And I actually post it quite often. I have several. I have one where I had Grok draw me standing in front of a CCP Learjet. I had Grok draw me and my wife on the CCP yacht. And I use that to troll people because I often get asked, well, you love China so much, you must be a paid shill. And I'll send that picture to him and I'll say, cheers from the CCP yacht. Just because
I've actually had someone say to me, if you love China so much, why don't you go and live there? Okay. That's good advice.
Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, I do live here. And I guess the last thing is, I'm not trying to tell people you need to come here and live, but I'm trying to say that China is a peace-loving nation. They like peace. They want to build infrastructure. They want to have important partnerships that are the reciprocal partnerships. And if you don't want to live here, come travel here. Come see for yourself.
Come have a look. And for many countries, I think there's now about 36, maybe more countries that can come here visa-free for 30 days. And pretty much anyone with a transit, if you bought a ticket to anywhere in the world, you can come via China for 10 days visa-free. And you can also go to places like Hainan visa-free, but Hainan's not really a microcosm of China. It's a bit different. And this is a good point to finish up on. China has gone to the least developing countries in the world, and there are 30-something of them, and said, you now effectively have zero tariffs. All your imports into China, all your exports to China are going to be completely tariff-free. America has just put 10%, 20%, 30, 40, 50% on all of those countries. It's even put tariffs onto islands that don't have a population. They're just crazy.
Yeah, it's bizarre behavior.
We've reached 90 minutes, Patrick, and I promised we wouldn't go over, and we just did. But it's been a very, very interesting 90 minutes. I would like to do it again. There's more topics that we want to discuss. And I saw Fernando is in there. He's got something he wants to talk about, scholarships. Why don't we get together, three of us, and talk China and scholarships in China? Because there's something he's working on at the moment, which I think is going to be really useful. And let's try and make that happen in the next few days or week at the most.
Yeah,
so
that's
we'll
good.
Get together again if you're free.
All right. We can talk about the cost of college, how much different it is than the United States.
Yeah, we can do that too. All right. On that happy note, I want to thank everybody. I'd also particularly like to thank Minchan and Donut Wu, two people who have made contributions to the channel. Thank you very much for that. And we will say goodbye at that and thank everybody for coming and joining us. And particularly Patrick, you can be found Life in China with Patrick on X.
On X.
Do you have YouTube as well?
Yes, it's Life in China with Patrick as well. I haven't been posting on there lately, but probably in the next couple of weeks I'll be posting more videos, just kind of more travel stuff. I get more political on X than I do on my YouTube channel. But yeah, I've got a YouTube channel.
If you like, you can. We could have streamed this to there as well, and I can give you a link so you can stream this onto your channel if you want to. So
yeah, I'd love that.
I'll give you a link to do that. Okay, thanks everyone, and thank you very much, Patrick, for joining me. We will see you next time. Bye for now, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.